wild yam, one of my favorite plants. It is in blossom and bloom little green flowers. But this one is very viney. Depending upon where the wild yam is growing in the soil, you can either have more vine or more leaf. And I've noticed in the deeper woods you get a lot more leaf, a lot bigger leaves. This patch right here must get a fair amount of sunshine. The leaves are very distinctly, to me, heart-shaped. And the little striations down from the top are a real marker or a signature to me that, hey, here's wild yam to start with. No other plant in the woods have these kind of markings on the leaves. So it makes it a real distinct plant to look at. And if you'll notice, maybe on a close-up a little later, the leaves come out from the center in a cluster around the stem. Can you see that? Yeah. That's another very distinct thing about wild yam you don't find in some other plants, how it just always, it comes out from the center, makes a circle around the stem. You go up, you have another cluster of leaves around the center. And this is probably one of its doctrinal signatures, how it can move out from the center and affects, I think, so many different parts of the body.
It's a joint remedy.
Yeah, it is a joint remedy, anti-inflammatory, reproductive health balancer, digestive aid. The list, I think, for wild yam is almost endless. It does so many things. And even historically, looking back to the Civil War and how it was used in the Civil War, how it was traditionally used by the settlers in the area, it was just one of those plants like ginseng that you could use for 15 different things. Everybody had some wild yam tucked away somewhere in their cabinet. It was the useful herb to have. It's kind of gotten, I think, hijacked by the marketing folks as in the wild yam cream, and we've forgotten how useful it is for so many other situations and conditions. The root is I'm not going to pull the plant, but the root is a mass of little tubulars in a big cluster, and it's already pretty hard. So if you do gather it in the wild, I suggest chopping it immediately and letting that dry. If you let it dry for a few days, it's almost impossible to chop into. It's so hard and woody. Matthew, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, it's usually growing in groves, and if you look around, actually, like there's some more of it, and there's little guys coming up there, which probably will be pretty big vines themselves. And actually, like if you just stuck your shovel even in a place like that, in between these plants, you'd find roots crossing all over, at least in an old stand. This is kind of a middle-aged stand, I'd say. There's not a ton of it. You might want to go to a place where there's even more of this plant. And you just stick your shovel in, and for me, I just, one shovelful is enough for a year. And you just find them crisscrossing all over, back and forth.
Right.
And they're called devil's bones sometimes, and they look like bones.
Like knuckles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing about them, kind of a signature, they grow in thickets in light woods or in fields that are being reclaimed by the forest. Like, they don't just grow out in the middle of sunlight by themselves, but they'll grow where there's getting to be some brush and young trees, and then often you'll find them in places like this where the forest has been growing for a long time, and they might even be getting crowded out, but they get up there and they get tall, and they get some of their light that way. Eventually maybe they get crowded out, but they like some shade, and they get real dominant, and they form these little thickets at the edge of the woods. And so that's kind of like a rabbit signature, and also the way the roots run back and forth, like all over, crisscrossing, are like a little Brer Rabbit in the briar patch. It's rabbits are at home, and it's what I call a rabbit medicine. That is a nutritive for people that are underfed, because rabbits are like kind of nervous, and they're the only animal I know that like watches you while they eat, sympathetic and parasympathetic at the same time. And so it's very nutritive, and it's progesteronic, which is the nutritive hormone, really. Hey,
Well, it's the basis for the other hormones too.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. And it is natural birth control, but that's just one small use. I use it a lot for hip joint deterioration, like in middle age and women, but sometimes men too. And it really can prevent you from having to have your hip joints replaced if you get at it early enough. I remember I treated my landlady one place. She was in her late 40s or early 50s, and she was real thin, just your kind of person that would have poor hip joints, poor bone structure, and in fact the doctor said she had shallow hip joints and she was having pain in them, and she might have to have her hips replaced eventually. And her sister and her mother, both of them were tougher, bigger framed, bonier people. Both of them had their hip joints replaced, one or both. But I treated her and she's still going fine. And one of the main symptoms is they feel restless at night, like they can't find a comfortable position, like you keep on rotating from side to side because your hips kind of hurt. That's actually a homeopathic symptom. I remember, and I learned that because my boss at Present Moment Herbs in the old days, Bob Gallagher, he said one night he was trying to sleep and he was restless and he was turning from side to side and he kept on turning, and he said, I need some roost tox, which is a good homeopathic remedy for restlessness, can't find a good position also. And he reached out to the side of the nightstand and he found some pills and he took some, and it was like perfect relief. And he said, I'll have to remember that feeling, then it'll help me understand roost tox and help me treat people with that in the future. And in the morning when he woke up, he looked at the bottle and it was Dioscorea wild yam.
Well, I was taught, and I have no reason to disbelieve because I found it to be true, that it relaxes the ligaments that attach around the hips, that hold the reproductive organs into place, because there's 3 ligaments on each side of the body that hold the reproductive system into place, and especially in women with a uterus. And one attaches even up here at the bottom of the rib cage. So when women go through menopause and everything is changing sizes and losing flexibility in the reproductive area, there's a lot of tugging and pulling on the hips. The problem is not really the hips, it's the flexibility, the fluid moving out of those ligaments and the connective tissue that support the uterus and the changing uterine size. Women with uterine fibroids, for instance, or women in pregnancy, they get the tugging on the hips. So this was a remedy for that kind of, see how there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 leaves around that center, the 6 ligaments. So that was taught, that was one of the signatures for the reproductive area and the support that holds the reproductive organs where they should be.
Which, interestingly enough, is another use of Solomon seal, too.
Yeah.
For kind of loosening, lubricating the actual tendons themselves.
Yeah.
Another thing is that as leaves go, it's kind of a yellowish leaf, which compared there to the sassafras, you can see. And that'll stay all summer, yellowish, and that's a gallbladder signature, and it's for gallbladder colic, which often goes with joints, and the gallbladder looks like a little valve or joint. So.
Yeah, we call it liver colic. You call it gallbladder colic?
Yeah.
Okay, we call it liver colic. A little pain over here, a little swollen.
Sure.
Yeah.
All the way to the actual gallstone passing.
Yes. It is really good. It's also in my gallbladder stone passing remedy kits, protocol of herbs.
And actually, this is a good illustration of the doctrine of specific indications. This is used both in homeopathy and in eclectic medicine, that it was specific for colic or spasmodic pains that made you bend backwards for relief, whereas I can't remember the one they used, colosynthus, bending forward, fetal position for relief. However, I do find that if the problem is tightness in the hip joints in here, that they do bend forward, but otherwise they like to bend back.
Is it good?
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about progesterone or progestogenic, I guess that's a word, herbs. And there are two that I use on a regular basis. One is wild yam, and I know there are going to be people out there who say there is no scientific evidence that wild yam contains any phytoprogesterone. And I totally concede that may be true, but I also know what I've seen in my practice. As Tommy Bass once said, I knows what I knows about herbs. And, I have seen wild yam work over and over in this kind of situation. When a woman has low progesterone activity. Now, generally the wild yam salve that's over the counter in the health food store also has some progesterone USP in it. And it's not totally wild yam. So if you think you're just getting wild yam in a topical application, please read your label to check and see. Basically, wild yam can be converted into progesterone in a laboratory going through several different processes to make this happen. What I have found, in traditional use is that when we cook up wild yam for this, there is, I think some of those processes may naturally occur in the cooking/heating change process. So wild yam needs to dry for 6 months before you use it. Traditional knowledge there. So it should be good and dry. And if you cook it up, bring it to a boil, take it back down to a simmer, and you need to cook it like 6, 8, 10, 12 hours. I've cooked it 12 hours before. Totally changes what wild yam is. And you'll have to keep adding water because you'll keep running out of water. Wild yam is, when you cook it up, it's kind of a very interesting herb because it smells very sweet when it's cooking. It smells like an amazing sweet hormonal vanilla kind of is filling your kitchen cooking area, and as soon as it passes your lips, that illusion goes away because it is the most bitter thing you have put in your mouth. Totally the most bitter thing you've put in your mouth. Wild yam does have some estrogenic activity too, research has shown, but I think it's with its progesterone activity that it shines the best. I've used it with clients in capsules, and I've used it where they've made up the teas. Even the capsules have some effect, so I do believe there's some conversion going on in the digestive tract or in the body in some way that is facilitating a progesterone-like activity from wild yam. Traditionally, it's also used for liver colic and liver problems and gallbladder problems, and it's still one of my favorite gallbladder herbs. Even in capsules, it really can help the gallbladder. And as a tea, I've often used it for the whole digestive tract. I don't encourage women to take it as a tonic unless they're using very small amounts. It's just another stronger herb. But for women who are having trouble holding on to a pregnancy, doing wild yam for about 2 months on a regular basis before they get pregnant, I have seen it over and over help that woman hold on to that pregnancy while her body is naturally increasing progesterone levels. So I think it's really excellent for that. I've also used it for women going through menopause with extreme hot flashes and extreme vaginal dryness. Usually I go just take it, every other day for a couple of weeks, and it's amazing how it shifts hormones, and the woman can go for months and months without any aid for dryness, where the woman might have been having to use
a lubricating aid every time she and her partner had sex. So I've seen it work. I can't tell you why it works, but I just know that it does. Wild yam appears to be free of any major long-term effects. I know it's considered safe as a food additive, and I read once that it's in beer, that it is one of the ingredients that helps provide saponins to give beer its head and to provide some bitterness in beer. So I know it's improved for that. And there's also some studies that say that it helps reduce tumor formation. But I think any strong hormonally active herb should be used with caution if someone does have a reproductive cancer. So wild yam should not be taken during pregnancy, which is why I have encouraged the women to kind of stop the wild yam for a few weeks before they get pregnant. Don't know that it would have any detrimental effect, but you can't take wild yam the whole time you're pregnant. That's not going to work. So it's either going to have done its job or it's not. And do not take concurrently with birth control pills, because it can make your birth control pills null and void and you might get pregnant whether you want to or not. So caution there.